All right, boys. I see some guys.
How do I share this on my page?
Anything I can do to help?
I'm good. Thank you.
Are you sure? Because he sounded a little panicked.
No, he's panicked on his side, not my side.
Okay, very good. Okay.
No, I'm the one freaking out. I think we're good though. All right, boys, let's get it started. I'm pretty sure I'm live. Throw me a thumbs up in the post or give me any tips, any audio problems or anything, guys. Appreciate the help. The man that we have here tonight really needs no introduction, but we'll try to introduce him. Legendary Swimbait maker Mike Bucca joins us. I have been fortunate enough to meet some really cool people over the years here doing social media, and Mike tops the list of just really interesting guys all the way around that I've met. Going from a fishing guide to a lure maker and opening up his own bait shop is just something I think a lot of us dream about doing at some point in our life. I know I certainly did. And to see somebody achieve a goal like that and really come as far as he's come, it's an honor to have you on, Mike, and it's an honor to consider you a friend, really. Thanks for coming on and talking with us.
You bet. Glad to be here.
So the first thing I did was I talked to some guys that follow along, and they're kind of starting bait makers. So I wondered if you could give any points to anybody out there who is a beginner in lure making. If you could go back in time and tell yourself, this is really important information in the beginning, what would you tell someone?
I started making baits back in the early 2000s. There wasn't very many of us. To give respect to the guys that started it was Jerry Rago and Scott Whitmer of 22nd Century. Those guys are the two that started the resin swim baits as we know it today. So, I came over. There wasn't many people in between me and them. I know there's Matt Lures and there's a couple other ones that I don't remember. Smaller type guys, more plastics than there was hard baits. The best advice I can give a new builder is to develop your own style. When you look at somebody's bait and it looks like somebody else's bait, that's really not what you're trying to do. It's okay to be inspired by people, by builders, but it's not okay to copy their key components. I know a lot of new guys come out there and says, well, you can only copy a shad so many different ways. And that's really not true. If you look at, for example, you can look at phony shad. You can look at my trick shad. You can look at Mickey's 316 workhorse. You can look at Rafa's baits. All four of those baits have a lot in common. They both represent a shad. However, they look nothing alike. You can't say one bait looks more similar to the others. It's if you carve a bait from scratch, that doesn't exempt you from, copying key features of another designer's baits. So that's the biggest thing, is develop your own style. So when you build that bait, they know that they tie to your name and not to somebody else's, a builder that's already in existence. That's the key advice I can give you. Another key advice would be do the due diligence to your designs. Very rarely the first bait, say for example, I'm making a bull shad, almost never do I take the first prototype and say we're done. You have to have high standards for yourself and for your bait. You need to test it. You need to swim it, and more times out of not, you're going to tweak it some way. So I see so many anglers, so many new guys selling the first bait out of a mold. They're in it to make money. I didn't get into it to make money at the very beginning. My whole goal was I was a guide here in Atlanta, and I just wanted my customers, my clients, to catch more fish, bigger fish. And that's why I got into it, because 16 years ago when I started out west, there was nothing. All the swim baits were out west where they were trout based. Here in Atlanta, where we do have some trout lakes up north, most of our stuff here in the southeast are, gizzard, shad, they're, threadfin, some yellow perch, some herring, of course. So, I was in it on early on just to try to get people to come in and guide and take trips with me. I had people fly all in when I got started because this was something that wasn't very popular in the East back 16 years ago. When I first started, keep in mind that these baits didn't exist. So I had to develop the market almost single-handedly,
Yeah. Throw up I'm going to hold up some visual aids for some people who may be new to swim baits or not know what we're talking about. We're talking about throwing really large baits, and you're really onto something. You've been onto something for years. I thought about that coming out of school myself. My dad always did woodworking. I was really close to kind of trying to develop a bait, because what I noticed coming out of fisheries school was the misconception of the size of fish that bass actually eat.
Absolutely.
People are confused. I can't tell you how many people see one of your baits on one of my rods and go, what are you fishing for?
Right.
And it's like, I'm fishing for bass. Bass eat big fish, man. So you really did hit on something there that was completely missing.
Yeah, I've been fighting that battle for 16 years now, just trying to educate the public. We do anywhere from 5 to 9 shows a year. And that's one of the main reasons I do it. I put boots on the ground and try to educate people, one person at a time, And we sell baits, and those people talk, and you just do that word of mouth and get that out there. But I always tell people, this is what those baits you have, that's what fish feed on every day. They don't hit spinner baits. They don't hit plastic worms. They don't hit finesse worms, or drop shot. That's trickery stuff there. What we do is we mimic the actual forage that they hit, and we make it look as realistic as we possibly can. So, that's the biggest thing, is getting that mindset that too big, there's no such thing as too big for the most part.
No, there really isn't. And that brings me to the next note that I have on my page here is functional art. And you touched on it right then. You've got Jen, and I want to have Jen on here too and discuss, her painting, all the stuff that she does for the painting. But that's exactly what you guys have created over there, is just like a functional art studio where the artwork is sold to go catch fish. And for anybody who's never been to the shop over there, it's an incredible place. If you're around Ackworth, go by there and check it out. It's a great store. I enjoy just going in there and seeing that operation and how it all works together. It's a cool.
The storefront back in late spring. As soon as we recover from all the shows that we're doing the Gadsden show week before the classic, and then we're doing the classic, and then we'll be done with shows. That will be like our 9th show or 8th show, something like that.
Okay.
And then give us a week or two to recover and fill in the gap so we have a good showing, and then we're probably going to reopen the Ackworth storefront there shortly after that.
Oh, okay. So you shut it down for when you're traveling then?
Yeah. During the show season, it's difficult things going everywhere,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Another note that I made there, one time I came into the shop and I was fortunate enough to meet with Matt and Tim from Tactical Bassin. And I got to meet them in the shop. And that was interesting, man. Those guys are cool guys. And that brings up another point that I wanted to make for anybody, listening here. Those guys did a great review with you on YouTube. Tactical Bassin has a in the field review of your baits.
Right.
And so we're not going to really cover everything that they covered on that there. There's no point. Just go watch the Tactical Bassin video with Mike. Mm-hmm. It's real good, real informative. And that kind of brings me over to just lure questions. I have a bunch of random lure questions for the followers that I ask, what questions would you ask Mike? And the first one that I've got underlined is the live gizzard. What's going on with this live gizzard shad that I keep hearing about?
That's one of my newest creations. Here's a little backstory. I have a 2,200 gallon test tank in my shop. It's 22 feet wide, 22 feet long, 5 feet wide, and about 3.5 feet deep. And usually once or twice a year, I'll go get some herring, or I'll go get some gizzard shad or some bluegill, and I'll throw them in there and just observe, And the gizzard shad has a very distinctive swim to it. They do a lot of rolling and a lot of tail swaying when they swim. And that is what I was trying to accomplish, was get a bait that swam similar to that. I also wanted to do a bait that defines what I call the crankbait, the crank down market. I try to have my baits to be what I consider the best swimming in each category. And when that bait that I made there, I had that bait in the drawer for 2 years at least. And the reason why is I put a whole bunch of different bills in there, and I changed the bill angle up a bunch, and I still just couldn't get what I was trying to get. A lot of times the tail would just stay straight and just follow the leader behind the rest of the head. The head would do this, but the tail was straight. But I wanted that tail to sway back and forth, and I wanted some roll to it. And I tried everything, every type of bill configuration you could: square bill, coffin bill, round bill, you name it. And that just goes to show you that you don't always put the first. I mean, I could have easily just put a lip on it and sold it, but I wanted something that was different than what's out there. So I found another bait design that had a very unique bill on it. And I'm like, I wonder if I cut that thing out of a different material and kind of make it flat and stick it in there and see what happens. And it was just a different shape. That's all it was. Bam, I put that thing in there and it just came alive. And, I made a couple more tweaks after that, and this was fantastic. So I'm not a big crankdown guy. I do swim, I do fish some, but I have a bunch of guys that are big crankdown guys that are forward sonar, and they just like the deep stuff, so they can look and crank them down. I said, I got to give one to Ashton. And Ashton went out there. His first fish was a 10-7. Oh,
okay.
That's how you want to start,
Yeah, that's positive. That's a positive sign.
Yeah, and then not a couple weeks later, Cody got a 10-something, a 10-2. So it's caught 2 10s, and it's ready,
Yeah. Are they cranking it into rocks? Are they banging it down on points? What are they doing?
Yeah, they're fishing forward sonar. They're just throwing it out there and just looking for the fish near the ditches and near the timber, and just typical forward sonar stuff. So we've already got 2 double digits on it, and it's barely been released. So it's been a phenomenal bait for us. We didn't expect to be thrown up that quick for demand for those things. So we started production modes on them, and we're starting to work on those. And so we can able to pump more out there instead of just a hand few. But I wanted to get some out there for the shows, which
Okay.
a couple of them we sold out of. And so now we're working on some more molds so we can get some volume behind us. But it's a phenomenal bait. It's 9 inches long. It's a big bait, really relatively big bait. It goes about 14 feet deep, and it's probably 3-ish ounces maybe. So it's a relatively big, long bait. I plan on making some different versions of it, some smaller ones, and some people want me to make even bigger ones than that. We'll see how that goes. Definitely want to make a shallower version.
Sure.
For spring. So,
what's that one diving to, Mike?
What's that now?
What is that lure dive to? The dive depth on the current one?
It dives to 14 feet. The current one.
Oh wow, a deep diver. Okay, yeah.
It gets down there.
That's cool. I want to check that one out. Now, I didn't realize that it was such a new. I thought this was something. So my guys here are, they're on top of the game. They got their eyes on you there. They're talking about lures that aren't even in full production yet. I'm proud of you boys. I noticed one come through. Brown Bait Company had a question back there. See if I can scroll back and see it. Does that make any sense to you? Brendan is a lure maker, one of the guys I consulted with on some of these questions.
Oops. Hold on, I lost you. Hold on.
Oh. He says, was the bill angle in combination with your tail right?
I mean, it wasn't really the bill angle. It was more of the configuration of the bill. That's the one thing I learned a long time ago. There's no school to teach you this stuff. You just have to use common sense sometimes, and sometimes that doesn't even work. You got to change different bill configurations. You may need to change the lifetime position, which is a big thing with crackdowns. There's a bunch of different things. You need to change the gappage between the segments because this bait's has 2 gaps in it, and it's a 3-piece. But actually, the cool thing that you have to realize with these baits is the tail acts as a 4th piece because it has a joint in it as well. And you need to get vibration down through the head to carry into the tail. So a lot of it was the length of the bill. So it's a very big bill. It's probably kind of 2.5 inches long, maybe. So it was a combination of a bunch of different things to get that right. And I know Lexan did not work with that thick bill. So we had to use probably, I think it's Garolite is the material. It's kind of like a computer chipboard stuff. Super thin but strong. So they can cut and catch, and it acts like a shovel. But that's a good question. But it wasn't a combination of bill angle and the tail, but it was more of a combination of the bill design and the line tie position was another key part of it.
Interesting. Well, Brendan is a sharp young man who builds real nice wooden lures. He's been following the page for a while, so just wanted to take a second to recognize him and everything he's done helping me out. Hope that helps you out, Brendan. And if you have any more questions, just throw them up there. We'll get to them. All right. Next on my sheet, well, I got trick shad. I remember the first time I saw the trick shad, you and I were fishing together. I think we were in Alabama that time. And I don't tell many people that story because it's kind of embarrassing for me. I think I was about 13 to 1 or 2 fish in the boat against Mike's trick shad, but the trick shad was a prototype back then.
You came back with the baby bull shad, though.
I did, but I mean, I did have to cheat, and I did, I didn't catch nearly the size of fish either. But yeah, I got my doors blown off on that one. But what is it about the trick shad that makes it different? Why did that happen to me, Mike?
Why did that happen? it's really, I mean, the one thing I've learned is the trick shot is a very special bait. I mean, it's one of those baits that I'm very privileged to have designed. And when I make a bait, they're either, I try to make them have that it factor. And that bait just has that it factor. And that's the key to success on mine. You know, we came out with the bullshit. I got damn lucky that that thing was a hit. Having said that, let me tell you a little story. The Cinco took 7 years to become popular. It's an iconic bait, but it took 7 years. It took me that long with the bullshot to get that out there, you know. So sometimes it's not an instant thing. It's just that you have to develop your followers, and you have to put your boots on the ground, and you have to get the baits in people's hands for that to happen, you know. And a lot of other things, you know, a lot of it's luck. But when you make a bait and you give it to your guys and you test it yourself, and the feedback is almost, wow, they really chewed this thing. You know, it's not one day, it's several days. And that is what you try to do with every bait, is have that it factor. And that bait just has it, you know. It's just extremely, it's something about it that the fish like, you know. To me, you know, a lot of people think that making a bait is art, and it is, but so is swim. Swim is an art too, you know. Those go hand in hand, you know. So that's the one thing that I pride myself. I look more at action way before I do aesthetics. I try to get something that swims good. You know, long before I look about color or any other thing. Color's at the very bottom of my list, but action and profile is size are the three top things that I look for when I choose a bait. But that bait just has it, you know. I've got people, I had a guy email me today, Pam, he says, Mike, you're a genius. Don't ever stop making baits. I said, what the hell did I do now? Because I just caught a 7-pounder and another 3 or 4 pounder. And this is the first time I've used this bait. I said, dude, it's just got it. It's just one of those things that really has it. So, but those are the things that I key in on, you know. And I think just if the roles were reversed, it would have happened to me and not you, you know. So I really think that, you know. But you know, that's what I think. I think it has a lot to do with that particular design is just really, really good.
It's interesting that you say that. And the one thing that I think, and I'll hold this one up too. This is another one of my favorite baits. It's the glide, the gill glide. And even though, you know, like if you're comparing this glide bait that's kind of a dart pause tart bot to that type of bait, they're really not the same. They're not the same shape. They're not the same colors. They're not mimicking the same prey.
Right.
But what I find interesting, just to me, that stands out in the gizzard shad pattern and in the sunfish pattern, the bluegill pattern, whatever you want to call that one, they actually kind of naturally move the same way. Gizzard shad and bluegill both burst with speed, pause, and burst with speed. Right? They not really none of them are schooling. They loosely schooled fish, but if you watch them, and I'm thinking about it really more from like watching them on an electrofishing boat when they're trying to get away. It's a burst of speed, a pause with a change of direction, and another burst of speed.
Right.
And I've noticed that's how you fish. When we fish together, you were on the speed. You did not slow down, even when the fishing was slow. And I like that. I'm the same way. I don't like going slower. I like going faster. And I just wanted to get your thoughts about that, about, you know, the speed at which you fish.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I learned early on. And I've always been a power fisherman, so to speak. And another story, y'all mentioned Matt Allen and Tim. Them, at first they struggled catching fish on my baits. They didn't, I said, well, what are you doing? And I took one of their best friends, who's a best friend of mine, Jared. I took him out fishing to one of my local ponds, lakes, and the things that he said to me, and I can't believe you fish so shallow and so fast. And I knew I fished shallow and fast. I just thought that I had that, that's just my particular way of fishing it. But a lot of people that are fishing it slower weren't getting as bit as much as those that were fishing it faster. And I had another guy who's won a couple of boats in Texas, and he buys his baits from me full price. He says, I don't want you to use any of these pictures, but here they are. And I've won a couple of boats with them. I said, well, damn, thank you. I respect the wishes and stuff. And I met him in ICAST, and he said, Mike, even if I told them what bait I'm catching them on, they couldn't do it. And I knew right then and there what he meant. That's the speed. Just keep the bait up high, making them go. And it's just something about that's, sometimes a retrieve is everything. And this is just one of those cases, you can catch them on that bait slow. There's no question about it, but it works. It excels when you burn it. And what I mean by burning it, I mean, keep it 6 inches or less in the water column. It doesn't have to be a high speed. It just has to be high, and just keep it going and just keep it up. 90 to 95% of those fish that I catch on the bull shad or glide bait, you see them hit it. You'll see a swirl, or you'll see them roll on it or whatever. And those things are what keep me going back is seeing those big fish nail that thing. But they literally destroy that thing when they hit it. And another thing that's really sticks out to me is we're really big into kayak with the kayak guys, and those that fish in the rivers and stuff. And when you fish a bull shad in the river, you're pretty much got to fish it only one way, or it's just going to get swept down the current. You got to keep it going. And they do extremely well with it. So those are the 3 things that I put together when I look about how I fish those baits and why it works as well as it does, and it's the retrieve rate. Now, that doesn't mean go get you an 8-to-1 and just go burn the crap out of it. I mean, you just want to keep it high in the water column and let the fish pin it at the surface. I think that's part of the allure as well, is the fish being able to pin it like a topwater, because they know if they can pin it on the surface, it's usually easier to catch than something that's in the middle of the water column. So, all in theory anyway. But I think those are the reasons why the speed thing really works.
I think you're right. And that was something that was a kind of an aha moment I had when we were fishing. And I'm going to use, like, if this is a surface of the water and the bait is moving, I just, for whatever reason, in 40 years of bass fishing, never thought about the bait fish being trapped in that position at the surface. Down at the bottom, sure, it makes sense. It can't go down any further. It can't go in, but it also can't go up any further.
Exactly.
So keeping it in that 6-inch range is putting it in no man's land, really.
Right.
And then you start kind of triggering on almost like a jerk bait type of instinct, where a reaction strike type of instinct, where you're like, and especially when you put the speed to it, hit it or don't hit it, but make a choice and make it now. And I've seen that. And it's amazing too. Like those lakes that we were fishing in Alabama were deep. They were old gravel pits, and bass were coming up 20 feet deep to that bait at the surface.
Yep.
And I don't know, you really wouldn't think that they would do that until you see them do it with a vengeance. It's amazing.
Right. Yep. I mean, it's just, I've seen them come out of 50, 60 feet of water. I don't know how deep they are, but I'm throwing over that depth of water, and they come up, especially in clear water, especially a spotted bass. A whole pack of them will come up. Clear water is a different game. You really play with their instincts a little bit, especially on lakes where you have high speed forage, which is herring lakes and trout lakes. Those fish move. When they're being chased, they are very agile. A threadfin is just higher herring. They go. Trout, they go.
Right.
Those are usually your better swim bait lakes that have those type the herring and the trout. Story here is on Alatoona now. It used to be nothing but threadfin. In the last 5 years, herring have exploded on that lake. It's just
Interesting.
It's got more herring than it does threadfin now, and the fish have completely changed how you catch them, and they're a whole lot more aggressive. They're easier to catch because of the herring, and it's just amazing what a forest change will do to fish like that. And that's just one example of many. But yeah, you're exactly right.
It's interesting you say that. I wonder, because if you look at the book knowledge we learned at school about blueback herring, we didn't have them in the lakes in Georgia back then when I was in school. They were kind of a mystery, but the behavior that they describe in the book is kind of the opposite of the threadfin shad. On sunny days, the herring will go to the surface.
That's correct.
Where the threadfins will go to the bottom. They'll go away from the sun, and then opposite, when it's cloudy, you'll get the threadies up, and the herring will go to the bottom.
100%.
And that creates probably an interesting dynamic that didn't exist in the lake before the herring, kind of took over. So it's changing the way those bass are reacting to the bait fish.
Yep. You're exactly right. That's one thing when you fish, it's like when you fish Lanier or Altoona, is the sun up. That's the biggest thing, is you look for the sun being up. And back then, before that, it was you wanted the cloud cover.
Right.
So just swapped.
Right. And I think too, then, that like these baits, you've got the herring, you've got the herring imitation baits, in multiple sizes. And it's just, I think it's a good idea to remember on the sunny days on the herring lakes, you don't be afraid to put those suckers out over 60 feet of water. Obviously, it seems ludicrous to be burning something 6 inches under the water in 50 or 60 feet, but it actually works really well sometimes. It's amazing. Which brings me to rod setup. I love the rod. You actually have your own rod, and I wanted to ask you about that. And I believe that's a Dobbins blank.
Correct.
And tell us about the rod, man. I love it.
I've got 2 rods that I designed for Dobbins rods, and one's an 835 MB, and the other is a 836 MB. The 835 is a 1 to 5 ounce lure rating. The 836 is a 2 to 8 ounce lure rating. They have some overlap there. And I use the 836 mostly. Me personally, I don't throw a lot of my smaller baits. I'm just a big fish hunter. I like to fish, 8-inch, 9-inch, 11-inch baits. That's what I like to throw. People are strange. Like, you don't even throw a lot of your smaller baits. So if you go for big fish, 9 times out of 10, I'm throwing something big. There are occasions when I will throw a smaller bait, but the bigger baits is what I throw. So I mainly throw my 836. I've got 5 of those, and I've only got 2 of the 835s. I use the 835s when, say, something's, 3.5, 4 ounces or less. It's a little bit lighter rod. That's the only difference when I choose one or the other. The 836 is pretty much the most versatile swim bait rod you'll find. You could throw damn near all of my baits with that 836, including the 11-inch, all the way down to the 6-inch with it. The 5-inch you can do it. It's a little tough. The 4-inch is a little brutal for even the 835. So if you got to get one, get the 836. And as far as reels, I've got a Mod Podge of reels. I've got reels of different brands. I've tried them all. And, I like the Tatulas, the dial tools, and they seem to work the best right out of the box. There's some other reels that you need to clean some of the grease out to get them to spin right. But the Tatulas are pretty reliable. What I've done with a lot of my reels, if I had an 8-1 or if I had a 5-3 or something, I sent them to my reel guy and I said, hey, put all 7-to-1 bearing, 7-to-1 ratio on all these things. 7-to-1 is a very good ratio, jack of all trades type ratio. Great for glide bets, great for wide glides, great for burning bull shads. You can go slow or awake. I have a 6.3, some 6.3s that I use for burritos and wave baits, and even some crank downs, and sometimes the live gizzard if you just need a slow retrieve. So those two are usually the only ratios I use, 6-to-3 and 7-to-1. And I like to keep my spools full so I can keep my retrieve speed the same on every lead. As far as line, I've been doing this for almost 18 years now, as switching swim baits and making bull shads for 16. I'm still a student of the game. I'm still trying to learn and find out what's best. But I let the fish tell me that. And I think that's what a lot of anglers, they listen to doc talk a lot. They listen to some of the books, Sometimes those aren't right, You'd be surprised. I used to be a 100% mono guy, and I still throw mono a little bit. But I've switched over a lot of my reels to braid, 80-pound, big stuff.
Yeah.
For a multitude of reasons. I got into striper fishing in the small rivers. That's one. I needed to be able to turn these things in the river. That's what got me started down the road. And as I was catching the stripers, I went bass fishing, and I wanted to make sure that, hey, the line's not spooking anything. And I did extremely well for what little fishing I did last year. I did extremely well. I think I caught 7 over 8. For me, that's great. That's great for Georgia. But I had no indications that I was getting spooking fish with the line. And I'm always mindful of that, because it sticks out like a sore thumb. But what I do is I take a black Sharpie, just for the sake of my mind, is that black Sharpie, that line, when it gets white, just to kind of camouflage it a little bit. I don't know if it helps or if it hurts, but I know it doesn't hurt. But, just to keep things as stealthy as you possibly can.
Right.
I've done a lot of braid. And another reason I use braid is some of the advantages of using braid. When you use braid, try not to use small diameter braid. And I know you're like, why? 50, 65 pound strength is plenty for fish, no question about it. But what's happening is that small diameter braid is digging into your spool. If you throw a rattle trap sometimes, even when you throw rattle traps, it digs into your spool. You hang a snag, you hook a fish, you do whatever, and you're going to get what you call cast offs. It's going to dig into your spool. You're going to go to cast, and something's going to give, and it's not going to be your bait. You're not going to stop, and that bait's going to keep sailing. Right. So that's why I use the 80 is for the so that it's thicker diameter. It doesn't dig into your spool as much as the smaller stuff. Now, if you're just careful, and you can get away with 65. Just be careful and not try to, hum it out there, which I'm guilty of doing a lot.
Right.
But I just didn't want to worry about that. So I use 80-pound braid a lot. Mono, I used to use 25-pound religiously.
I remember that. Yeah, we had that conversation, and I've been using the 80 and 100-pound braid for a long time. I like the heavier braid because it seems to give you more hook setting power kind of longer away.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was kind of what. But you gotta go with that 80 or 100. Don't fool with any braid. You'll end up popping it, like you said. It'll just pop. I don't know. And don't. I find that you got to make sure the knot is right with braid too. Certain knots will cut themselves with braid, so be careful. And I'm not a knot expert. I always use that Palomar knot, and I know it does okay. But certain knots are not good for braid. You have to be careful with that.
The thing with mono and each line has its advantages and disadvantages. The problem with mono is the stretch. You just have to be very mindful of your form. When you cast that bait out there, you almost have to have that rod pointed a little bit off from the bait that you're reeling in, because when that fish hits, you're going to need all 100, 90 degrees, 80 degrees, or however long it is to get that hook in them. So you got to make sure you're having good form. You can't have your rod off to your side, especially on a long cast. You're not going to be able to get that hook in them. So
Right.
you really have to got good form when you're fishing the mono. That's one of the biggest disadvantages of it. The braid, you can get away with murder almost because it automatically sticks it. But that's just, each line has its disadvantages and advantages, and that just happens to be the one for mono.
Yeah, I've tend to go with like the 80 to 100-pound braid and a little bit tighter drag too. Like I said, because a lot of times my strikes will come on that first initial, like hits the water, boom, boom, pause, it's on. And if you're making longer casts, like you said, the braid will almost pin them by itself.
Right.
But having that good moderate break in that rod and having the bend in the rod, and as that rod bends, it's just the more it bends, the more the hooks get driven in.
Yeah.
One listener here, Mike, has a question about your opinion on the bull shad's a better choice than the bull gill when targeting smallmouth. Do you think there's a difference there? What's your opinion on that, Mike?
That's a great question. It depends on the quality of fish you're fishing for. If you're fishing for 2-3 pound fish, it might they'll hit it. You might lose some. But one of the reasons I made the bullgill is I didn't put any fins on it, and I call the fins fish deflectors. Because that's exactly what they do. They deflect fish, It gives you realism, but your idea of designing the bait is to catch fish. Unfortunately, you have to catch fishermen before you catch fish, for me anyway.
Yeah.
But it depends on the quality of the smileys that you're looking for. I've got pictures on my Instagram, 6-7 pound smileys on 9-inch baits. So the thing that I've learned being a spotted bass guide, and I know smallies and spots are pretty similar. Those guys, those two fish are ferocious. They will pull a largemouth by the tail, and they are much more aggressive than largemouth. I've caught 2-pound spots on 11-inch baits.
Oh yeah.
It's just those fish don't give up. There's nothing going to stop a 5-pound smallie from hitting a 9-inch bait. Nothing. It's in your head if you think if you think otherwise. If you're fishing rivers with a bunch of 2s and 3s in there, yeah, you might want to fish something a little smaller. But if you're fishing trophy fish, if you're a trophy guy like myself, I want the biggest smallie I can catch, and I'm going to throw a big bait to try to get that fish out. I've always felt like big bass, especially big bass, or bass in general, are opportunistic feeders. The example that I use a lot is I'm a big guy. I weigh 300 pounds. I'm sitting on the couch. My wife puts some green bean casserole up there on the deck on the bar. I'm not going to get out of my chair for that casserole. No. But you put that T-bone on that casserole on that table, I'm getting up.
That's
big bass the same way. They want to eat one big meal and go back to the couch. They don't want to chase minnows all day. They're too big. They can't exert that much energy. If you want to lose weight, you exercise.
Yeah.
If you want to gain weight, you sit down and you do nothing.
Right.
So that's a theory anyway. But that's why I think, big baits attract followers that you always hear about better than smaller baits because of the size of the bait. They want that one meal and done. And that's why I think it works as well as it does. And I also think the reason why it works as well as it does is people don't throw them.
Yep.
They don't see it that often. There's too many people that think 9-inch baits are too big for bass fishing. And here comes Mike with a 9-inch bait they've never seen before in their entire life.
Yeah.
I've got an example. I used to have access to an 11-acre pond up in LJ, and I killed the fish when I first got there. 25, 30 pounds every trip. no problem. And I beat that thing to death, day after day after day.
You're not going to do that to them too long.
You're lucky if you've got a 5-pound fish.
Mm-hmm.
Those fish get acclimated.
They'll figure you out.
To a big bait just like they will, but it just shows you that they can get acclimated to small baits. They can for sure get acclimated to big baits, but throwing something that they don't see much of in a heavily pressured lake is a big deal. A-rig, for example, when the A-rig came about, it blew up. You know, they've never seen an A-rig before. A-rigs are still good today, but still, I mean, that was a very significant, you know, that was up there with the forward sonar. They banned A-rigs, you know, in a lot of tournaments. So throwing things that fish don't see all the time is sometimes key, especially big fish. You know, they don't get big by being stupid.
No, they do not. And I've seen in my job and managing the smaller ponds exactly what you're describing. You go to a bass heavy pond is usually the problem. Catch and release a little too long, or maybe it was a little overstocked, whatever, but you got too many bass in the pond. But inevitably, you know, and I know there'll be a few bass in every single pond that do climb up. They do get bigger. Even if most of the bass are stunted at a pound, a few bass do get big. And what those bass do then is eat those other 1 pound bass. The 1 pounders become their forage.
Right.
So it takes 10 pounds for one bass to grow 1 pound. And if you have a bass that's eating 1 pound meals, it's eating like an alligator. It's eating like once or twice a month. It's not hard to catch. It's incredibly hard to catch because it's meals, and it's keyed in on other bass, which, like, again, you're one of the only people I've ever seen who even has a bass mimic, you know?
Right.
And I've seen this, and I know it works that way because I'll go in there with the electrofishing boat, pull all those 1 pound bass out of there, right? Well, I've just removed those bass as food source. The first thing you see is the rebound. You get rid of all the ones, and the shad or bluegill or whatever the forage base is instantly rebounds, and you just see millions of fish around the edge after the first couple spawns of the spring. It changes everything up, but what it really changes up is those big bass don't have those 1 pound meals anymore. They've got to go searching for smaller, more abundant bait fish like bluegill, or it just shifts it right to basically the size of the lures that people are using too. They're off the 1 pound fish because those are gone, and they're back down to eating 25 times a day instead of twice a month for the same amount of weight, you see. And it always happens. You pull the bass out, and then the next year somebody pulls like a 9.5 pound bass out of that pond.
Yep.
I
believe it.
Yep. It totally does. And I saw another question here. I'm doing bad at keeping up with well, there's so many comments. That's where our comments section is going crazy tonight. Thanks for joining, everyone. If you have any questions, throw it in there and I'll lose it. I thought it was it's about the 11-inch. There's an 11-inch trick shad that I wanted to ask you about, that Brendan asked about. That's what it was. So what is the deal with the 11-inch trick shad?
The 11-inch is something that I've been throwing for a little bit. I did it for the stripers, and it just happened to do decent at bass too. You know, for the longest time there, you kind of top out with the bass at around 9 inches. For me, you know, anything bigger than 9 inches, it starts to get to be a hard sell. You catch fish on bigger bait, 11-inch baits, don't get me wrong, but it seems to be a little bit longer. But the trick shad, 11-inch trick shad, it's been, like I was saying earlier, it's just been proving me wrong.
Right.
You know, and I brought it out because the industry is changing a little bit as well. You know, we're starting to throw bigger and bigger baits. I'm not saying it's shifted from smaller. It will never shift from the smaller baits, but when I brought out my 9-inch cod 4 or 5 years ago, it just, it was too early for those people to throw the baits that size here in the East anyway. And they're getting more acclimated, and they're working their way up. They're learning. They're seeing these big fish come up for these type of baits, and that's why I made that, is to to cater to those people. We also have a big striper following as well. So that would be something, and we probably need to even make even bigger for those guys. Those guys throw 13, 15-inch baits sometimes.
Wow.
40, 50-pound stripers. And that's something that I got into last year, just catching the stripers. And when you catch one on a 9-inch bait and you put it next to the fish, you're like, Jesus, this is not even dessert for these fish, So you're putting 5-aught hooks on there, and and you just go down. It just really opens your eyes just when it comes to stripers, how big of a bait they'll really eat. So
yeah. Fishing MD's got a question coming through. Is there any particular time of year? I don't know. I think we kind of covered that. It sounds like you and I are real similar in our fishing, Mike. We'll rock big baits most of the time. I know I do. I don't really scale down much at all. Do you think there's any type of year that you'll scale back much?
Particular time of year that this type of bait, the 11-inch trick, usually spring. I mean, for bass, it's spring. For me, my stripers is always the middle of summer. But I'm in the rivers. I'm in heavy current. I'm in the cooler water. Those stripers are going up there trying to get to the thermal refuges and stuff. So, they're a much skinnier water. So basically I go from bass fishing through the spawn, and then I go, starting June, July, I start going stripers heavy from June, July, September. So I fish 11-inch baits starting now to the end of September. Different species of fish. Come summer, it's a little bit of a hard sell for the bass, but you can still get some to come up. But it's each area is different. If you're in, say, Gunnersville or something, where you've got a lot of grass, there's a lot of oxygenated water, a lot of cooler water up under the grass, those fish will be more aggressive. If you're up in the mountains, up in the Chattahoochee or even North Carolina or East Tennessee, those waters are a little cooler up there because their tail race ran. So, it's all about water temperature. And the reason I say what I always say is, if there's a good topwater bite, there's a good swim bait bite somewhere. You just got to find it. It's probably right there, and nothing wrong with trying an 11-inch bait. And I always tell people, you'll learn more about trophy bass throwing swim baits in a year time than you will in a lifetime throwing conventional stuff. And the reason I get that is because you're going to see, and you're going to see more bass. You may not catch them, but that's information. That's content. And you're going to catch more bigger bass too. So if you can't see them and you can't catch them as often, you're not going to get that information. And that's how you use it to train yourself, is to get that information. They're there. You've got them interested. You just got to catch them now. You just got to figure out how to do the rest of it. It may be you need to go at nighttime. You may need to throw right at and when it's dark or something, where their guard is a little bit less down. So, but there's always a way. That's just getting that confidence and throwing those things and seeing the fish. It's a lot of. It's very surprising for a lot of people how many big fish you really see throwing those bigger stuff. And I know Tactical Bass put out a video years ago. It's probably the worst one that they've ever put out, but it was actually the most informative for me. And I've known it for years, but I'm surprised it didn't catch on. Is they throw these gigantic, big 15-inch baits. They're called gawker baits, because they're just gigantic. And you throw them out there in the middle of a cove. You're not really trying to catch them, but you just want to see. Right. What that thing pulls up. Those are just curious. There's kind of like hunting deer when they're logging. You know, when they're
Right.
logging, the deer just come. They just come to see what the hell's going on. There's all this ruckus, tearing all trees down, and there's tracks everywhere. Bass are the same way. When you throw something out there that's just really, really unorthodox, especially big baits, they just come and they go to investigate and experiment. So I couldn't even tell you what the name of the video is, but it was a really good video because I knew that, but I just didn't know how other people knew that. So
Right. Well, I noticed when we fished together in those gravel pits in South Alabama, you mentioned that, and you kind of were using your glide bait technique and your fishing large bait technique almost the same way as I was using an electrofishing boat. You could, even though you weren't catching the fish, you could see it. I mean, you turned around to me one time, I remember, and you said, "Let's get out of here. There's no fish in here." We would have seen them if there was. And, you know, and I agreed, you know, and it's interesting. Another thing that comes to mind here in Florida, like I've got the forward facing sonar on the boat, you know, and it's a real hole oriented place here. The bass will all be piled up in one place, it seems like. So what I've done is you can turn that, instead of looking at it, it'll look like a pizza slice out in front of the boat like that. And on your baits, I can see those bass following, even though the water's tannic. I'm marking fish now. I'm watching them follow the bait on the forward facing and marking, okay, I saw one here, so I know where to go back to. And I've been kind of using forward facing and your technique together, even though I can't see in this dark water, and it's been helping me out a lot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to learn from forward sonar. I mean, I don't put it down, and you know, I mean, just the learning aspect is crazy. You know, you're fishing 20 feet of water, and you throw a guide bait out there and let it sink, and they're just all freaking all around it, and just and they're just, you know, any second now. But if you throw that same bait over the top of them on the surface, they won't come up and hit it sometimes, especially this time of year. You know,
Right.
It's amazing that you just have to get it down to that zone where they're at, and how many fish actually follow your bait every time you make a cast is mind-blowing sometimes.
I know. It's crazy. That's what I like to watch that. And now I've got to get better with the forward facing, because sometimes it'll be like gar. I bought a brand new chick shad and had a gar cut it off on the third cast right by the dock. I was so mad he bit the line.
Yeah.
And I'll get it when they lower the lake. It's just right by the dock. But I'm like, come on, man. But I learned though that not all the fish that are following your bait are bass, and you can see them though. Like once you see it's a gar, you can tell, oh, that's gar or that's whatever. Lord knows out here where I live, it could be a bull shark. You know, you never know. Let's see, we got Frank's got a question coming in. Do you target pikes, like toothy fish, pike, musky? Wondering about 80 to 100 pound fluoro leaders and how they affect the action of the baits. Interesting.
Good question. Do I fish for pike or musky? Not yet. It's on my bucket list. We've got a lot of musky just north of me, in East Tennessee, Central Tennessee. That's definitely something I want to do. I have no experience of fishing 80 to 100 pound leaders at this time. I would say that the bigger the bait, the less problem it would have with it. You know, if you're fishing pike, I would think you're fishing the 9 or the 11, you know, or bigger baits. I mean, anytime you increase the line size of any size bait, it's usually going to affect the action some, especially guide baits. Is it enough to attract the fish? Probably not. You know, if the bait wouldn't be fishing to its full capacity as far as guiding and stuff, but I don't think you really need it that much for some bites. But I'm not sure. I'm just playing in theory. It will affect the action probably, but I don't think it'll be enough to not fish them, is my point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to get up and do some musky fishing, and that's kind of on my bucket list too. It's been out of my range of. I've done some northern pike fishing once, and I had a ball catching the northerns, but I've never gone after the musky. That's on my bucket list too. And I've noticed too, though, as I've been making more effort on YouTube, putting content all over here, and I've noticed you have as well. What are your plans looking forward? And specifically, one question I had from one of the bait makers that follows is, would you ever consider maybe having a membership like master type class on YouTube where guys could pay monthly and take a lure making class with you?
That's a touchy one there. I'm pretty I'm pretty firm about a lot of different things, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe after I retire,
Right.
might do something like that.
It's a competitive business, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It is. It is. You know, there's more and more bait makers now than there's ever. As far as swim bait guys, it seems like they're popping up every week. You know, it's getting brutal out there. You know, you're getting more and more, and some good builders too. But you know, it's just you got to keep your edge somehow. You know, there's a lot of things that I put my pouring station open and off for a reason. You know, just keep it out of view for when we do things for Instagram or Facebook and stuff down low. But we keep it up there for that particular one of those. One reason of many is why we keep it up there. So never say never to that question.
Right. Yeah. That's cool, man. We're running over an hour, and I don't want to keep you. I know you're a busy man and you've got an early morning to get to. I'm going to scroll through one more time and look for any questions I might have missed. As we reach the end of the program here, I just wanted to remind you guys that there's a good video you can go and watch with the tactical bassin guys about Mike and his techniques and baits. And there was also the other one too, the Catch Co. Making a legendary bait, I think. Wasn't that what it was called, Mike? Didn't they do a video on you? The Catch Company video, wasn't there?
The Craftsman.
It's on the Craftsman.
The Craftsman. I think it's
that's a good one to catch too.
YouTube page. Yeah, that was a pretty cool video to do. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a great one, man. They did a really good job. John Allred, I met John over at the shop once with you, and he's got a question for us. What knot are you tying with the 80-pound braid? He's been throwing the bull shads on fluoro.
Good question, John. How you doing, buddy? I think what the knot that I'm using is called a braid knot. I also think it's also called the San Diego Jam knot, double San Diego Jam knot, if I'm not mistaken. But you start off like a Palomar. You got a loop in one hand and you got the two lines in your other. You take that loop and go around 8 times, and then you put the loop through the loop under the above the hook eye, and you cinch it. It's really easy to tie. And then that gives you with 3 tag lines. You have the loop, which is 2 tag lines. You cut it, and then you cut the single one. So it's a 3 tag line cut, but it's really easy. I do 7 or 8 times with braid and 3 times with mono or fluoro if you use fluorocarbon. But that's the only knot I use. I've been using it for years. Never had any issues with it. You know, the key is to wrap it that 7, 8 times with braid, or otherwise it'll slip. As with braid or not, it will.
There was another question back here. Do you have any interest in doing balsa baits anymore? You can do anything out of wood ever again?
The balsa bulls, that goes way back. I had those baits made overseas, and for some reason or another, that manufacturer just went AWOL on me. And I tried to find another manufacturer, and it turns out that it's extremely difficult to get the people overseas to do any kind of wood designs. I don't know why that is, but I can't make them anymore. The guy went poof on me. I was going to try to make some more and some bigger ones as well, but I couldn't find a manufacturer to do them for me. So I haven't given up, but I haven't really looked a whole lot either. But I'm always looking for somebody that can make me some wood baits. They did a fantastic job making them, and they were very consistent. So but those were the same guys that did the Balsa Pro, which is the guys that that started that bait. They've been discontinued or whatever for twice already, and I picked it up the third time. But it's a phenomenal looking bait. It was almost as fun to cast as it was to fish. You could just throw like a bullet, and you look at your reel. But it's a lot of fun. Hey Jeremy, how you doing? 9-inch Shad. Are you changing hooks for river stripers? That's a trick. You got me there. I haven't yet, but I probably should.
Right?
Yeah. I haven't regretted it yet so far. Knock on wood. The 3-aught hooks, KVDs that we use are actually 3X, if I'm not mistaken. So they're pretty stout.
Mm-hmm.
But they bend in those bigger stripers. They sure do. So. Probably going to be safe and try to change them out. I will say I'm a little leery because last year I hooked myself in my hand 3 times in a row, 3 trips back to back to back.
I saw that on social media. That was brutal, man.
The first time I went to the doctor, it was $1,000. I was like, I ain't doing that again. So I got hooked 2 more times. I said, it's got to come out. I think I've got a video I got to post. Jen has it, but I'm just sitting there for about 15 minutes, just sitting there and looking at it. I got it tied to the post, and I got it on my line. And I finally did it. But yeah, it comes out. But yeah, the chances are good. I'm going to change them this year. How many baits do you think you have made and never brought to the market due to them not swimming right or them being too niche possibly? Wow, that's a pretty cool question. Let me think. I'm going to be honest with you, Brown Bait Company. I've got a lot of baits in my drawer that are what I call half finished. They didn't turn out as good as I thought they would, but they need something else done to them. And I didn't quite have anything around handy that I can change. So I leave them in my drawer, and I clean that drawer out probably once every 3 months or so. And I go through that drawer and just find stuff and just look and say, damn, I need to revisit that concept and push it a little bit further. To be honest with you, this will be funny. My buddy Brian Correa came down from New Hampshire and visited me a little while back. He found the trick shot in the drawer. It was because of him that he found that bait. He got up on the tank and he just goes through my drawer, see what all kind of crap I'm doing. And he put up, I don't remember that bait. I don't know why I put it back in the drawer. We started making some, and he took it home, and wow, it just went off from there. So that just goes to show you, when you do this for as long as I have, sometimes you need a different set of eyes,
right?
To tunnel vision. But a lot of niche baits, yeah. A lot of my bigger baits is what I call niche baits because they're not very many people use them. I think I said earlier, I throw nothing but 8 to 11-inch baits almost exclusively. I don't throw a lot of 5, 6, and 7s, but we sell more 5s and 6s than anything,
Right.
And that's just because it's got more people are too scared to throw the bigger stuff. So I call my bigger baits niche baits. But I make them because that's what I throw and I offer them. We have a handful of molds of the bigger stuff, and we have boatloads of molds of the smaller stuff just to be able to get the volume out that we do. So, but good question. Good question.
Yeah, man, that's interesting. And that brings up another thought. You sell a lot of baits in like Australia and stuff, like Murray cod and way different kinds of species. So,
right.
one good point is if it can stand up to a fish like that, it can certainly stand up to a muskie or a pike or these baits that Mike Bait makes are extremely tough. They don't break. You don't have to have it. You're not going to have any failure issues. Which kind of leads me to one question that I thought of. Do you think the material that the bait is made out of, the density of that material matters, Mike, in the way that like gives it an it factor, like you were talking about with the trick shad?
Does the density? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I do too. I really
you alter the density of every bait you make, because you need. If you didn't alter the density of the bait, your ballast would not take effect. You know, you try to make the bait light as you possibly can, but durable as you possibly can. And I've been known to walk that fine line quite often because I think that line needs to be walked to get the best action that you can. I make a lot of my baits. You'll see a lot of bait builders out there. They make fat baits, and you know why they make fat baits? It's probably because they don't know how to float a little skinny bait.
right.
It's not easy, you know. Resin baits are not. I shouldn't be said made to float, but they're more difficult to float because you have to ballast them and you have to carry the hooks and the hardware and all that kind of stuff. So you're walking a fine line there of getting it done, getting that bait to swim. Wood would be a better choice for some of those baits, especially the floating baits, because it's naturally buoyant.
Sure.
But yeah, we mess with the density quite a bit, and more ways than one. But it's you know, I've worked with some of the best resin companies in the world, and you know, I've actually helped design 2 resins for 2 companies and stuff. So I've got a good understanding of how resin works and what it takes to do production. But yeah, we do alter the resins quite a bit. We actually we actually combine resins in a lot of ways as well, so we can get a mixture of both properties. Barramundi, cool. Have you ever been, Kyle? Have you ever been to the Osceola Outdoors just south of Orlando? They have the only barramundi pond open to the public for you to fish in the entire United States.
No kidding.
Yeah, they are a blast to fish. You'll catch 20, 30 of them. They're easy. They're thick in there. They'll hit swim. They won't let you fish with any treble hooks. You have to use single hooks. But they don't want to gill their fish or whatever. Fly rod, they'll hit fly rod. They'll hit bull shads. They'll hit burritos. They'll hit whatever frogs. They'll hit whatever. But that's a lot of fun. I think it was a couple $100, but you'll catch more fish in 2 hours doing that than you will any other place. So you definitely get your money's worth. So every time we go to ICAST, we usually shoot down there to Orlando, to their place about 45 minutes south of Orlando, and go in there for a session of barramundi fishing. They've also got peacock bass, and that's the furthest north you'll have them, unless they've died off or something.
Right. Yeah. I got to go with Florida Bass Mistress. You know, she follows the page and does a lot of fishing with the bull shad too. And I got to go down to her. She's got if you ever get down there, she's got a cool HOA pond. It's not a pond, it's a lake. It's 100 acres, but she's got peas in it, so you can just walk the bank and cast and catch them. Yeah, it's a great setup down there. It was a lot of fun going fishing with her that day. But that's cool. I didn't know about the barramundi in Orlando, man. I wanted to get on some of that action. That's awesome. Yeah.
That's not far from you.
No, not far at all. I'd like to go check that out for sure. Well, I don't see any more questions really here, Mike. And like I said, I don't want to keep you too long. We've been here over an hour now. And just wanted to thank you again for coming on and talking with us live and answering all our questions. I appreciate it. And for any of you guys watching still at this point, go give Mike's page a follow over at Bullshad. I've been noticing he's doing a lot more 1-minute videos and stuff are coming by my page. He's making an effort over there on his YouTube. Let's get him some follows over there. Thank you, gentlemen. And I'm going to end it now. I appreciate it.
You bet. Take care. Thanks, Shan.
Thanks, man.